ready to go tonight with grid down lighting. You know, when the utilities are off, light's a really nice thing to have is what it comes down to, and light itself is a tool, but we'll use tools for that. So where does it fit into the overall scheme of self-reliant living, provident living? Well, there's quite a number of classes, as you've seen, and in the tools class, the blue arrow points right to where this one is in grid down lighting, and then tools class actually has the longest list of all the classes. The mission, of course, always has been, always will be, to reach and teach as many people as we can about some of the concepts, the principles, the means, the understanding for self-reliant living, which of course is all about provident living. Everything, I believe, should be backed up to principles. If you're just going off of lists and going off of somebody's nice idea, but you don't understand how and why things work, you can find yourself in trouble. The 9 core preparedness modules, of course, everything that we talk about fits within these. In fact, everything in your daily life goes within them. The law of provident living is the foundational law all the time that I want people to understand, and for people that are brand new, we mention them very briefly. Spiritual attitude, knowledge, and stuff in that order of priority. The law of stewardship, I believe, is why we're all here this evening. That is about the authority that you have to act, the responsibility to act, and then we all will be held accountable properly for what we do and for what we do not do. The law of the parachute simply says you better have one that better be right before you jump out of a plane, but in this case we're talking about being prepared for things that happen in life. Now it's your attitudes, knowledge, skills, and supplies, because disasters have no responsibility for your well-being. That's your stewardship to take care of those things. There's quite a number of these foundational principles that we talk about. I just list them here briefly, and then within each one of the 9 preparedness modules, there are own principles about how and why things work, and that's what I try to teach in these classes, to give you an understanding of how and why things work. Well, you can learn more about these basic principles online. It's available, Foundation Class 1001, Prepare to Survive No Matter What. That is available free online. Anybody can log into it and watch it. And you can find it by going to the website under audio casts, and when you open that, go to the past casts, and you'll see a list of them right there, the top one being 1001. So it's available to anybody, and I encourage you to send, friends, family, and neighbors there to help them learn about these things. There's also a DVD. It's a 2-hour principle-based DVD that's available to you. The cost is modest on this. We try to sell things at a very modest price so people can afford to get it. That's available through the website also. Of course, we're talking about tools tonight, and that's where this one fits in. So when we class 8102 and we're talking about lighting, if the grid goes away, what are you going to do? How are you going to be prepared to just be okay no matter what? Well, light. It is an important tool, and when things are dark, we're going to use it to accomplish work. We're going to use it for safety and for our general well-being. So if we look at working, most of this stuff makes sense. We kind of know this, but sometimes it helps to just remind us why it is so important and why you need to have backup. You see, you need to see things to get them done very often, at least to do them more efficiently. You can do a lot of things by braille, but it sure is slow. You can do some tasks more precisely. Some tasks need light so you can see them carefully. And it's about safety, so that you get tasks done safely, both for you. There's some things you just have to see to get them done, certain kinds of tasks. Well, it is about safety. It's to prevent injury, to prevent damage to possessions, prevent damage to equipment, and some activities that just obviously require vision to be able to do them properly. And then we have well-being. Well, it is so that we can care for oneself and for others. We might be thinking about an injury situation. You need to be able to see what you're doing. But we will use light for well-being, to play and relax and enjoy life, for social activities and gathering. How about just to read and study? If you're trying to review some things that you have recorded or books, that's a great thing to have light for. It's where you can read other than just in the daytime. And as I put down here, sometimes it just feels good. It's actually a psychological boost. And some people are more susceptible to being, I'll say, down, not being quite as happy when it's dark and dark all the time. Other people are not quite as affected by it. So from a psychological standpoint, and this can be a stress reduction means for people that might, in fact, be under a lot of stress. And we'll think of children in particular. Children who have to stay in the dark very often will be quite unhappy about that. So light for them is going to be a real psychological boost. Well, sources of light. And we'll be talking about each one of these. Sunlight, burning something, get something really hot, stimulate something, moon, stars, skylight, and then multiply what happens to be available. Burning fuels for light. This is one of the very common backup ways of doing this. And you need to use the right fuel in the right device. And there's quite a number of them. We did a class recently on fuels. I would encourage you to study that. In fact, we'll talk a little more about that, because fuels is one of the ways of producing light. If you're going to have a fuel and you're going to have something that's going to burn, you need to be able to start a fire. And so you must absolutely be able to get one going at different times, not just for light, but for safety and survival at other times. Many different ways of starting fires. You want to learn about those things. Of course, we think mostly about matches because it's a common thing, it's a simple thing. I would remind you, if you haven't attended some of the other classes, that these matches do not store indefinitely. They store much longer if you will keep them dry, cool, and oxygen away from them. So using oxygen absorbers or vacuum packing them will extend their life. But if you have matches that have been in storage for 20 years and they're just kind of out in the open, shall we say, you better check them. They might not work. You may want to be rotating and replacing them because they do in fact age. We have different kinds of lighters and things, some that you can refill and some that are disposable. These are all handy ways of doing it. Now, there's many other ways than that we talk about in the fire class. As a matter of fact, fire is a tool, and it fits into the tools class 8103, because fire, it is a most important survival tool, and you have to absolutely know that when you need one and must have one, you've got to be able to get one going. So learn about that. That's one of the classes we'll be doing here in the future also. Candles and wax. Now, this is a small flame usually, but you know, a small flame, a small light, when it's really, really dark, can make all the difference. These little candles is something that you want to have, and I'd say have quite a few of them. Just keep collecting them. You can have big ones and small ones and skinny ones, ones that are in glass. I save money on a lot of my candles by picking them up at garage sales. They look kind of ugly. So you end up buying what would normally be a $6 or $8 or $10 candle. You get it for 25 cents or 50 cents. And if need be, I can take and melt that down, and with candle molds or with dipping, because if you have a few supplies like wick, you can recycle them into new, better looking candles if you want. And of course, you can also have blocks of the paraffin wax, as I do there, so that I can make new candles if desired. Now, dealing with candles, and one of the things I like to point out are there's all kinds of little devices, and people are trying to sell you a bunch of things. And there's these candle lanterns, because they sound like a really great idea. Well, I buy candle lanterns and I look at them, and here's one of these. It's got a glass in it and it has this spring-loaded candle that fits inside, so it'll keep pushing it up. Here's the thing that's interesting about these candle lanterns. They're usually made out of aluminum because it's easy to work with and it's lightweight for backpackers. Guess what aluminum does? Well, it transfers heat very well. And in this case, after you've run that candle for, maybe a half hour or so, that aluminum holder is getting all nice and warm, so it melts the wax and the spring pushes it up. And notice where that yellow arrow is there, how all the wax has been shoved out the side, and you absolutely can't run that thing anymore. It's now stuck. So things that look like great ideas on the shelf, and I kind of go like, well, the guys that make these things, either they only run them for 5 minutes at a time, or they don't use them at all. You can have things like this. This is the New Wick, which is a great little candle in a can. Kind of pricey, but you know, it does a good job, and it won't fail on you because it's contained in that can. And you can have multiple fires going if you want. You see, there's 3 of those wicks that have been lit. I can have up to 6 of them or more if I have them. And you can run 1 to 6 of them, pick up one of them with those tweezers there and blow it out. So you have a little control over that light, and they rate it for running for about 120 hours. And I don't know if that's with 1 wick or with 6 wicks, because I've never run mine long enough to find out. You can look for things like that, and there may be others out there. And very often as I show you things, it's not to say that you should get this. In fact, in some cases, I don't even know if these things are made anymore. I've had a lot of these things for a while. But it's a concept and an idea of the types of things you're looking for. Here's another one of those little candle lanterns. It's really a cool little device when you see it on the shelf, and how it closes the window and opens the window on it. You have this candle that's down inside of it, and it's going to be, it's spring loaded in there, but notice the same thing happened. Everything, all that flame and all that heat is contained down inside of this, and look at what's happened to that wax candle in there. It's just melted and dripped over to the side that's in there, and it no longer will run properly. So here again, things look really cool on the shelf, but get your stuff out and use it. You should play with everything is the thing I talk about. You want to make a candle lantern? Well, here's one that'll sort of do the job. A number 10 can, some aluminum foil on the bottom, and a screw through the bottom that you hook the candle onto. Doesn't cost very much to do, so you can make your own device if you would like. You might look for other things like this. Sometimes you'll see these things called liquid candles out there. Well, here's this one. When it's all folded up, the glass shield slides down over the canister that you have the kerosene in, or in this case it's a lamp oil. It's just a very highly refined kerosene, and it closes the wick and everything inside. It'll expand out like this so that you have a windshield around it, and then it can be hung up. That chain will let you hang it up. It's actually very cleverly designed. Again, I don't know if this is manufactured anymore, but it's a nice little liquid candle that you could refill with the highly refined kerosene right there, the lamp oils that you can buy. They're very, very clear, as this one is right here. Here's one that's plastic, and it is a little candle that you can light and burn, and you can see the flame off to the right. Now, this is actually smaller. In terms of the flame, it's smaller than a regular candle, and we'll see this one again in a little light comparison later on. Different fuels for different purposes. There's quite a number of them out there that you might consider. Of course, we're just talking about lighting in this case. And it's extremely important that you understand your options and that you have backups. You need to have them all. You don't want to be just single source, or you don't want to be dependent on, well, one or two things. You know, I'm going to have candles and kerosene, and that's it. One of the reasons that you want to be multi-sourced on things with different appliances and different fuels is, if we have a long-term emergency, you know, how long is it going to be? What are you going to be able to find? What can you scrounge? You know, part of this is about being able to go out there and scrounge up some things, perhaps, that you may need to replenish your stuff with. So you want to have backups that back up the backup that's backing up what your preference is. I have things I like as my first choice, but then I want to have my backups. And it's one of the things that's extremely important that you understand is you do not cross-mix fuels and appliances. If you have a kerosene appliance and you put gasoline in it, you're going to die, or you're going to be seriously injured and suffer greatly. You're going to burn your house down. You must run the right fuel in the right appliance. Now, some of them are rated and are designed to use multiple fuels, but be sure you know how to do that, because in some cases you have to make adjustments to that appliance. Mixing fuels into different appliances that were not designed for is truly deadly dangerous. You must understand that. You must have knowledge about these things. You know, remember my formula about what is knowledge? K equals I times E. K, knowledge, equals information multiplied by experience. What that means is I'm giving you information tonight. I can't give you any knowledge. You can read a book, watch a video. You get no knowledge from them. All that you get is information. So what you have to do is take that information and practice with it, play with it. You want to break some things. Now's the time to break something. Now's the time to make a mistake, because you can fix it, you can replace it. You want to be learning how to do things in the dark. You know, the idea of having light is so you can see something. Well, it's dark and now you need some light. How adept are you at getting a fire going and starting things in the dark, doing things where you can't see very well? So you do things in the dark now, and you develop habits and memory about how and why things work and how to get your device out and get it started when you have very low light. You have to know how to safely transfer fuels. Now, we talked a little bit about that in the fuels class, Fuels for Grid Down Living. Here again, you want to practice now, make mistakes now, break things now, do things wrong. You know, foul up your equipment because you didn't have the transfer right. You got things contaminated or dirty, because now you can fix it. But in this transferring of fuel, I want to point out some things. Now, there's something wrong with this picture. You know, if we had time and with our live audience, there's three things that are wrong in that picture. Let me point them out to you. Number one, this is inside. See the carpet? Don't ever be transferring fuel inside. I don't care what kind of fuel it is. You do it outside. Number two, this fuel is this is kerosene in this case, going into a lantern, and it's being done over top of the person, you know, balancing it on your leg, which is something you might think of doing. Now, kerosene isn't too bad of a thing because it's not very explosive, but it stinks like crazy. You're going to wish you could take a bath, and it's going to stain things. So you never transfer fuel while it can spill on something that you want to keep, like your body or your clothing. And then number 3, when you look at that bottle, the way that it's being held, particularly if that is a full bottle, a new bottle, where you're trying to pour it that way, you can almost guarantee that you're going to get a glug of it going out as you get a slug of air going in and a bunch of fuel coming up, so now you have a spill. Let's take a look at this one. Now, we're outside, so that's the green arrow, outside where it should be done. But what's wrong here? Take a look at that lantern. In this case, it's being held up in the air. And you have things that kind of move around. You want it to be steadied, so you shouldn't be holding it up. Now, the kerosene, again, in that bottle, you see how it's being poured? As a full bottle, that's wrong. Now, once that bottle is less than half full, it would be okay to do it that way. Here's another one. Take a look at this one at the top picture. Now, in this case, where we have number 3, you see that can is turned so that the spout is on the high end, and for a full can, you're less likely to get a glug of it going out. But number 1, again, this is being done inside. Number 2, it's over top of a person. And worst of all, this happens to be a gasoline product, which is extremely explosive. It needs to be outside. If you take a look at 3 with the red arrow, you see it's being poured wrong. So if you didn't know what I meant by the cans, look at the arrows coming off of number 3. The red arrow to the right, that can is held wrong. You're going to get a glug of fuel coming out. And number 3, green arrow going up, that's the right way to do it when you have a full container. Okay, once more on these. Here we are outside. Number 1, that's a good sign. Number 2, the lantern in this case is now being steadied on the ground. And number 3, that bottle is being held sideways, and or if need be, you could even have the spout so that it's up. But sideways works well now. So you're not going to be getting a big slug of air going in and a blast of fuel coming out. Those are proper ways to be pouring liquid fuels, and you may learn some techniques that you like. One of the transfers of fuel that we talked about in the fuels class I will not cover here, but that's in supplies class 9101, and that is the ability to transfer propane from a large bottle into a smaller bottle. That is something you need to know how to safely do. Now, you shouldn't do that unless you have no other choice. You should always take your bottles and have them filled by somebody that's is authorized to do that. But if you're in an emergency and you need to transfer fuel, you need to know how to do it safely, because if you do it wrong, you have a big problem. So refer to the fuels class on that. And once again, in the fuels class, you don't want to be transferring into the little red canisters. You can't do that. You can do it, and we'll teach you how to do that in fuels class, into those small propane bottles, but that's a little more dicey and a little more tricky than putting it into that 20-pound white container that you see there. Well, you need to know how to scavenge fuels, what you're looking for, how to tell if a fuel is still good. Is it contaminated? You don't want to practice these things now. You want to make mistakes now. You want to be able to do these things when conditions are poor. You want to develop the habits of being able to do them now. Now, one of the things that's in the supplies class 9101 is about the ability to filter fuels, and the problem that you'll have with condensation in water. If you're talking about gasoline from automobile tanks, it'll have water in the bottom. If you're taking it out of an airplane tank, it'll have water in it. If you're taking it out of a can that has been opened, it'll have water in it. It may have rust and junk and things. So learn about that. Using felt is the way that you do that in particular. You can learn more in class 9101. Okay, so we have a variety of these different appliances, and it's extremely important that you don't put the wrong fuel with them because you'll have trouble. Some of them, there's no way to really have the wrong fuel, and others you can, just whatever you pour in there, it's in it. Learn about fuels. That's our fuels class, which is supplies class 9101, fuels for grid down living. It's about safety. It's about the benefits of the different fuels. It's about their hazards and also about their limitations. All right, propane lanterns. This is a safe, and I put safe in quotes right here because anytime you're dealing with fire and flame, there will be some issues. But the propane has some safety that some of the other fuels do not. If you take a look at these 3 different appliances from left to right, we have a white gas lantern, a kerosene lantern, and a propane lantern all the way to the right. First thing to note is this: white gas, never, never, never at any time inside of any kind of a thing, vehicle, tent, house, anything. It's for outside, it's for in the open, breezy barn and out to the shed, but it must not be run inside. The kerosene is great inside. Kerosene's kind of smelly and it's sooty. but it'll work. But propane is very clean, and it is much safer to use in terms of the combustion products that come off of it. Now, we have a flame going here with any one of these. It's consuming oxygen. It's giving off carbon dioxide, and in some cases, small amounts of carbon monoxide. The biggest problem with white gas is it is guaranteed to produce copious amounts of carbon monoxide, deadly. Now, carbon dioxide will kill you too because it displaces the oxygen, so you must be sure that you always have adequate ventilation. That's whether it's propane or kerosene that's being used inside. Your propane is likely to be in a small bottle like the green one to the right. Those hold about 1/4 of a gallon is about what's in that, or a little less than 1/4 of a gallon that's in them. Propane weighs about 4.6 pounds per gallon. These carry just a little over 1 pound of propane in them, at least a lot of them that you find. Now, they could actually put more in there, but they don't. That tank, that white tank, is going to have about 20 pounds of propane in it when it's completely full. Your appliances, in the case of light, might be something like this little case that carries my propane lantern top that is designed to screw directly onto that bottle, and it has a little stand that goes with it. Now, you can have lamp stands that will hook onto your larger bottles and things like that. I would recommend that generally you don't have any propane container inside larger than these little green bottles like this for safety reasons. When you take a look at these propane lanterns, they use a mantle. That's that white sock with a green top on it. These mantles have not been burned. When you get them, they're silk. At least traditionally they were silk with rare earths that are impregnated into them. And they're flexible, they're quite durable until you tie them on, and then to get them to work you have to burn them. Here they have been just lit with a match, and you burn off the silk, leaving this little rare earth matrix that's there. It's kind of a fine little screen. Now, these are very, very delicate. You just blow them and they'll blow apart. That's why you have a windshield on them, and you don't want to be knocking these lanterns around because they can fail. But that mantle glows very, very bright when you get the flame inside of it, and it gives you this nice white light coming off of it. White gas lanterns. They're great for outside, but deadly indoors. Here, once again, never, never, never indoors. I can't emphasize that enough because people make that mistake. They assume they can get away with it. And we've had a family friend who died because of white gas, and he was very experienced. So never white gas inside. Now, I recommend that with your both your gasoline stoves, your white gas stoves, and your lanterns, we're talking about lanterns here, I will only use the fuel, like the Coleman fuels, the other lantern fuels and stove fuels, rather than unleaded gasoline. Now, they will tell you that in these appliances, they're now designed so that you can use gasoline in them. However, your equipment will not last as long if you use the gasoline in them. It plugs up your generators sooner, and the generator is one of the things that can fail on you. So I use just the lantern fuels unless I have no other choice, and then I will shift over to gasoline if that's what I have to do. Now, you need to know how these things operate, and there's different designs. Now, I have some very old lanterns, and then I have some newer lanterns on them, and how you pump them up and how you control them. And if you look at the controls, in fact, on the right over there, you'll see there's a new one up at the top, and facing you is a black knob, and that's all of your controls that are there. That's both the cleaning rod is controlled by that, as well as the open and shut and the throttling valve. If you look at that lower lantern down below, which is probably about approaching, it's at least 50 years old now, it might be 60. You see off to the right there on the side, that little crank wheel on there, that was to run your little cleaning rod. That's an older one that has that. And then the throttle is that black knob off to the side. Now, both of those lanterns have a pump on them because these lanterns are energized by pumping up the fuel supply that's down below the reservoir by pressurizing it with air to force the liquid fuel up into the generator, where it is turned into a vapor and then it's burned inside of the mantles. You have some others like this. This is the Petromax, which is a multi-fuel lantern, and it will burn a variety of other fuels. But if you have one of those, and they're great, they're kind of pricey, if you have one of them, you want to be doing lots of practice right now with the different fuels, because it doesn't run all fuels equally easily. and you need to know what's going to work and how easily it's going to work, because this lantern, as they say, you can run in it mineral spirits, gasoline, white gas, alcohol. You can run in them kerosene, things like that. So multi-fuel, yes, but when you switch to a different fuel, it's tricky to get things going. So practice, 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 play with them. I like to have my lanterns and things like that, and a carrying case is a handy way to have it. Before I had the carrying cases, I had a cardboard box with padding in it. That works too. It's just to keep from knocking these things around, breaking the globe that's on it, and also a place to carry extra of the mantles. And you see them on the base over there. And if you're going to have a mantle lantern, you want to be stocking up on those mantles. It's important. Buy them now. They're cheap now. When an emergency comes and supplies are short, those things are going to cost, $10 a piece or something like that. So buy them now when you get them for $1 a piece. So here is our white gas again on the left, never inside. Kerosene can be used inside, propane inside, and even if it's one of these little single mantle white gas stoves, one of the little tiny backpacking ones, never inside. I cannot overemphasize that enough. They're great for outside, and one of the great advantages of white gas is it works very well at low temperatures, both in our stoves, large ones, small ones. And then here's our lantern up at Snow College, and that top one, that's 2010. And in the lower right picture down there, that is another snow adventure training camp, probably about 1984, if I remember correctly. And in that particular one in 84, the temperatures was running 30 to 40 below zero. And propane won't work in those temperatures. It completely fails. Kerosene will burn, but it's a real pain to get it going. Alcohol will also burn, but it's difficult to get going. White gas is the easiest to get going in the extreme temperatures. That's why I use a lot of it. Kerosene lamps, used indoors and outdoors. Well, it is great for inside. We have a couple of different types of kerosene lamps we can use. These, what people would think of as these old-style lanterns that we see around, called the hurricane lamp. And the reason it was called a hurricane lamp is, well, it could go outside in the wind. I don't know about a hurricane, but certainly a breeze isn't going to blow it out. An open flame will be blown out very easily. And they're very cleverly designed. These were designed and built back in an era when this was the primary lighting source. And so they worked problems out within them. If you'll take a look at the arrows that are on there, the orange arrow on the left, that's the globe. That black arrow points inside the globe to what would be the wick shield, the flame shield. And then inside of that, at the yellow arrow, you see the wick. And then off to the right, the green arrow points to a little lifter handle that lets you raise the globe up. It's spring-loaded down, and here it is raised up because that's how I can get in to trim the wick and service the wick if I need to. And also, how do you light it? That glass is on there. Some lamps, you see, you can just pick if it's an indoor lamp, you can just pick the globe off of it. Open it up and then light the wick. And in this case, this is one that's very tightly closed up, and so it's spring-loaded. That lever at the green, if you remember when we step back one right here, it's up right there. I push it down and it latches down, and that is holding that globe up in the whole assembly. The yellow arrow by that knob, that's the flame adjustment. That's the wick adjuster right there to raise and lower the wick. That'll give you a different size of flame and light. Here it is all closed up again, and you see the wick down in that flame shield. And that flame shield is both to direct the air and the heat, and it's a part of making these things not flicker very much and run very nicely. One of the things that you'll need to learn to do when you have a wick lantern is trim the wick. You hear about that, talking about, trimming the wicks, and one of the service things you have to do. Black arrow is the back side, the underside of that flame shield, the wick shield. Yellow arrow is the wick itself, and then the orange arrow to the right is the globe. And you see, these were cleverly designed. You can raise that globe up so that you can get in to light it, but that doesn't allow you to easily trim it. Now it folds completely out of the way, so I have complete access to the wick without that flame shield or wick shield in the way. Again, that wick shield is important for this thing to operate properly. You'll need to learn how to trim a wick properly, and this is where playing with it now is. And when a wick has been burning for a while, it gets little soot and cinders off to the side. And if you look over to the right there, you see one. Now that wick hasn't been used, but how it's kind of splayed out. That will give you a flickering flame. It'll also have more of a tendency to smoke. What you want your wick to be shaped more like is the one that's right in the center right there. You see how it's trimmed off the sides till it comes up to kind of a point. So on the little cinders that get on there, you'll either break them off or rub them off, or in some cases you need to literally trim the wick with a pair of nice sharp scissors. So that's our wick lanterns, our kerosene lanterns, our hurricane lamps that have been around for many, many generations. A great little device, worth having. It's a little tricky to get a good quality one right now since we don't use them very much in this country. Then there is the Aladdin kerosene lamp. It is a mantle kerosene lamp, not a wick. Now it has a wick because the wick is what's going to, if you will, wick the fuel up and then allow it to burn. But it has a mantle very much like your gasoline, white gas lanterns, your propane lanterns. This is one that has not been burned yet. It's been installed in there because they're much more durable until you burn them. Once you take and burn it, as has been done here, just like the mantles on that propane lantern in there, it's very, very tender. And you can damage them quite easily. You have to be careful with them. But that's the process of taking that yellow kerosene flame, because it is very yellow, but when you burn it inside of one of these mantles that's made with silk and the rare earths glow and they give you a white light rather than the yellow kerosene light. So it's much more pleasing to watch, to read things with. You see color better, and also it doesn't have a tendency to flicker. So that's the Aladdin lamp. They're a very nice device. They work very, very well. You have a chimney on them. You see the chimney laying down below. And if you're going to have one of these, get spare parts. You need spare mantles. That's the little blue thing and the orange boxes behind it. And then the wick, which is a fairly complex wick, that's kind of that white thing laid out there and the boxes off to the side. You want to have spare parts because if you lose any one of those, it no longer works. Here's the chimneys. There are two chimneys. If you're above 4,000 feet, you'd like to have the high altitude chimney, which is the taller one. The standard chimney is the one off to the left right there. You can also just put a chimney extender on the short one. You could do it with something as simple as just aluminum foil that's rolled up and fits on there to make it taller so that it'll draft better. It's all about the draft. One of the things you may want to consider with any of these burning devices is recovering the heat. Thermal recovery, because that heat is just being dumped into the room, which might be fine in the winter, but let's do something else with it at the same time. Here's my Aladdin lamp, and in this case I've taken a tomato cage and put over top of it. And then I can make a holder that will hold a stainless steel pot up there. You see a little bit above my chimney. Now then, I put around that a heat shroud chimney. You're looking down on top of it, there's the glass chimney down below. Here's my rolled up sheet metal chimney around it. You can see the wires that hold my pot. There's the pot sitting on top of it. Well, what's important is that pot doesn't seal up that top altogether because you have to have a draft and allow the heat to pass through it. It comes up to the bottom of the pot along the sides, and it boils water in a hurry because there's a lot of heat coming out of that lamp. So now while I'm getting light from my lamp, I could also be fixing, hot water for a meal or for tea or soup or anything that I wanted to. The Petromax folks actually have a device that goes on top of their lantern so you can be getting light and a place to put your pots and you can cook on top of it because there's a huge amount of heat coming off the tops of these. So learn about the different types of fuel, liquid fuel devices and the different ones that you can use, gaseous and all of those, because it's important that you have these options, and I believe that you should have every one of these devices. There's different makes and models of them, but I can use kerosene, I can use gasoline, white gas, I can use paraffin wax, I can use propane. I recommend that you have the capability to use all of those because you don't know what's going to be available when things get tough. Okay, learn how to repair all of these devices. And you need to practice with them now. You need to make mistakes now. You need to have spare parts now. You need to break something now and trying to take care of it so you can fix it. You can take it to the shop. You learn how to do these things in low light and poor light. And you want to develop habits and memory about how to do things now. There you are. Your lantern isn't working. It's dark. You want to fix it because you have the need for light. And now you're trying to read in the dark how to fix this thing. That's not the time to learn how to do that. Tools Class 8220, lantern, lamp, and camp stove maintenance, care, and repair. Just quick quick ideas in here. The one that everybody needs to know to do right off the bat, that's these little mantles. You see in that picture on the left, there's a broken mantle. This thing's been jostled too hard. And they will actually wear out over time. Even if you don't knock them around, they eventually just wear through because that heat is boiling off some of those rare earths over time. So you have those mantles you see in that picture on the lower right. I have a bunch of them, and they're not that hard to put on, but you need to get used to tying them on, or they have some with draw cords. Learn how to do that. Learn how to replace your mantles, because you'll just have to do that one. But each one of these things has a pump in them. Many of them do. You need to know how to take that pump apart, get it apart properly, how to service it. Different ones will have different kinds of pumps. And, you know, what are you going to do? Can you make some of these parts? And yes, you can. As a matter of fact, that little leather in some of them are plastic. If it breaks or wears out, they will eventually wear out. You need to know how to make some replacement parts for that. And I've had to do that. And then also how to assemble them properly and put them back together right. Because that can be a little bit tricky. So you practice now, you make your mistakes now. Also, the generators that are in these lanterns, also our white gas stoves have generators in them. How to remove that generator, how to take it apart, how to clean it, and you want to have spare parts anyway, because eventually they can get so crudted up you can't work with them. And they have a little needle out there on the very end. If you look in this picture in the upper right-hand corner, you see there's a tiny, tiny little hair of a needle out there. That's what's cleaning that jet out of these things. You drop that and break that off, you no longer have the ability to clean that jet. This is one of the newer stoves. It operates that cleaning rod a little bit differently. Know how to take them apart, know how to repair them, and have spare parts. Vegetable oil for lighting. Vegetable oils can do a pretty nice job. As a matter of fact, this is the oldest known lamp, and it is also the safest fuel of all to use. You have very little danger from this other than fire. When we talk about vegetable oils, we're talking about, well, any of your vegetable oils. It can be corn oil, it can be canola oil, it can be olive oil. I prefer olive oil because it has the most pleasing smell when it burns. It has a very, very nice smell to it. Now, the Internet's a wonderful thing. There's all kinds of information all over the Internet, but, you know, watch out who's saying what about what. In my research here a year or so ago, I was out there looking, and there's a guy, I think he called himself the green guy. He's talking about all the green things you can do. And he was saying that you can burn oil, vegetable oil, in your kerosene lamp. And he shows you how to fill it up and those kinds of things. I thought, like, now I know a little bit about how this thing works, and I'm going like, I don't think so. I mean, I didn't think so. But I want to know. Maybe I'm wrong. Just because I have a theory about what will work and what doesn't work doesn't mean that I really know, so you go try it. So I got out 2 identical lamps, and I put kerosene in one, and I put olive oil in the other one, and I knew that I'd have some trouble getting the olive oil going, but he showed you know, you got to soak down the wick and get it all full of oil and things like that, because frankly, olive oil doesn't wick very far. Now, here's my kerosene lamp. You see, I've got the globe is folded back. There's the wick, and that's the height that it stands up when it's burning. All right? Because it has to stand up through that wick shield in there, and it has to dip down into the kerosene. Here is my other lamp that had olive oil in it. Notice the difference between these things. I'm consuming wick like crazy. As a matter of fact, the lamp on the left that was running kerosene, I ran that lamp for about 2 hours. I lit both of them, saw how they would light. The olive oil one was tough to get going, and then I noticed after it wasn't run 10 minutes, and that's how much wick it consumed. You know, we consumed a ½ inch of wick. My wick is not going to last very long, and the light was poor, and it was smoky, and you're going to have to keep trimming that thing all the time. So probably what this guy did was he dumped in some olive oil, soaked up the wick, and lit it, and says, yep, it works. Okay, it works for 2 minutes. You need to know, can you go do chores? That one on the left, I ran for almost 2 hours. I was out doing chores. I decided I'm going to do all my chores with a kerosene lamp because it had been a long time since I did that. So I was outside working and walking. I left it running for 2 hours. That is the amount of wick that I consumed in 2 hours, that one on the left. You're not burning the wick. What's happening is inside of that wick shield in there, that flame shield, is it's getting all nice and hot down in there, and it evaporates, or I should say that it turns that into a gas, because nothing will burn unless it's a gas. So we have liquid kerosene that has to turn into a gas, then it'll burn, and that's part of the magic of these little lamps, so they give you a nice bright flame and they don't flicker, is that little wick shield, because it acts kind of like a generator in your white gas stoves. The other one over here you see on the right, we're just consuming it, and here's the reason. I mentioned earlier that there's the amount of wick that stands up when that lantern is running, the yellow area on the left, and then that gray area, it also has to dip down into the kerosene reservoir. I have 3 or 4 inches of wick that's above the oil in this case. In the case of olive oil, which has a much higher viscosity, it doesn't wick up that wick very well. As a matter of fact, if you don't take and soak that wick in it, and it'll never make it up there to burn in the first place. So the guy was right to say that you needed to soak down that wick and get your oil in it, and it doesn't have to be olive oil, it can be corn oil or anything like that, and then you can light it, but the problem is it doesn't wick up new oil very rapidly at all. Now if I was to, I just thought about something, if I was to take and set that lamp on top of a stove and heat the stove and get that oil up to about 250 degrees, it'll probably wick up that wick pretty well. Of course, then I also have a terrible fire hazard, so don't even consider doing that kind of a thing. Because it's much thicker, it has a much higher viscosity, it doesn't wick very well at all. That's the problem. So, check your sources. Check mine. I tried to tell you how and why things work so you might have an understanding, but I'm telling you, play with it. Anything I tell you to do, you should experiment with and know that it works for you, not just for me. Making an oil lamp. Well, let's talk about using vegetable oil, though, because you can, in fact, do that quite nicely. But it's for vegetable oils only. Corn oil, cottonseed oil, soybean oil, olive oil, canola oil, safflower oil, any one of those, it's all going to be the same. But olive oil is traditionally the one, and it's been used for the longest time. Here are my 2 olive oil lamps that I've made. Now, they're in glass jars because you can screw a lid on them, so they're charged up with oil, ready to go. You look down inside, and you can see the oil pool, and you see the wick that's sitting right down in there. And what I want to point out is the fact that that wick is sitting right down in there just a little bit above the oil, and you're going to light that wick sitting down in there. This should give you a hint. If you put anything else other than olive oil in there, you just made a bomb. You put kerosene in there, you're going to burn your house down. You put gasoline in there, it's going to blow up in your face, and you have a trip going to the hospital. This is for vegetable oil only. Don't ever, ever, ever put anything other than vegetable oil in one of these things. So there it is. Now let's make this. I made one of these things. What do you need? Some wire. Baling wire. Copper wire is easy to work with. You could do it out of a coat hanger. They're just kind of stiff. So I'm going to use copper wire because it's very easy to work with. And when you're first learning some of your wirecraft, we do a class on that one too, by the way, some of your wirecraft, copper wire is a nice place to start. Where do you get your copper wire? Well, in this case, it's electrical wiring that I've just stripped the insulation off of the Romex using my pliers and my knife. So here's a stripping process. Do this all the time. There's my knife, there's the wire, and I just either pull my hand with a knife back along there with my thumb underneath it to support it. Can't possibly cut myself because the wire is keeping me away from my thumb, or I pull the wire through that, not even moving the blade. The blade is not moving relative to my body. So I can just strip the insulation off of that, have this nice copper wire that's available, and then with my different pliers, in this case I'm using a pair of duckbill pliers because it's kind of easy to work with. They're kind of thin and broad. You could do long nose pliers or whatever you happen to have. The duckbills are quite nice. I'm gauging the width that I need to make that wick holder because what I'm building is a wick holder that's going to hold that wick up just out of the oil. So I can gauge it and then wrap it around this using another pair of pliers to crimp it down so that the wick will pull through it, but it'll be snugly held. Just twist this around in whatever shape you want. You might have to make 2 or 3 of them before you get it right the way that you want it. Hey, it's free, so go ahead and do that. It doesn't cost you anything. And see, here's my wick that'll stand up in that, down in my pool of oil. Now, the best way to get your wick, of course, is to buy them. And there's various widths, 1/2 inch, 3/4, 7/8, 1 inch wide, different widths on those things. If you didn't have a wick, you could make your own. That's why you save all the cotton balls you ever had, or all of the cotton that may be in the top of some of your prescriptions and things like that. Now be sure that they're cotton. A lot of times they're putting rayon in there and that doesn't work as well. Now all I have to do is take my wick and my wick holder, put it down inside of one of these glass jars. It has this little handle that comes up close to the top. I can still screw the lid on it, but I can reach in there to pick it up because when it's time to light it, you just pick it up out of there. Don't try to go down inside to light it. You'll burn yourself. So you pick it up, light it, get it lit, and then you can put it back down in that pool of oil. When I'm done with it, I can put the lid on. I'll just blow out the flame and put the lid on it. Do these work? They work very nicely. Here's two of them taken 2 different times with that nice little flame burning in there. It consumes the oil slowly. By the way, this is one you can refuel safely if the oil is getting down a little bit lower that's in there, and you can tell because it's starting to flicker and things like that. You can just pour some more olive oil in there. It's not explosive. Here's the great safety advantage of this lamp. If I was to tip this thing over off of my table onto the floor, shatter it, and spread the oil all over, the flame goes out. You tip over a kerosene lamp, you probably burn your house down if you can't get it out quickly. You tip over something with gasoline in it, if it does leak out, it's very, very explosive. This will not explode, and it does not ignite easily. And you see, this will tell you why that kerosene lamp wasn't working very well, because that wick is only going to be like a ½ inch up out of the oil to burn. You get it up 2 inches out of the oil, it doesn't do well. It burns the wick until it gets down close enough to the oil to be able to wick it up into it. That's how these things work. Now, you'll need to trim these wicks the same way. You'll simply take that little wick holder out of it, and the same process, trim it, rub it off, take the little cinders off of it to keep it in kind of a pointed shape, because that'll give you the cleanest flame. Now, we've been looking at different ones of these lamps, and so I'll do a little light comparison here. On the left is that liquid candle that had the metal around it. On the right is the one that was one of them that you can buy. They sell these around, these little candles. You'll observe that the flame on the one on the right isn't very big. It doesn't give nearly as much light. Here we are with something behind it so you can read and you can see the amount of light that they give off. It's different. Just understand what it'll do. The one on the right, well, it's useful. It's just not a lot of light. It'll run for quite a while. If I compare that same one with just a regular one of these little candles that's in the little glass thing that you put around for give you atmosphere or what have you, the little candle doesn't give off as much light as that liquid candle does. Let's compare it with one of these large stand-up candles, and you can see that a regular old candle gives a lot more light than that little liquid candle. Here's the comparison between I think that was called the ultralight, the one on the left. It was the ultralight liquid candle, and then a regular big old candle, and the ultralight gives you more light than that large candle. Here is the ultralight compared to the olive oil lamp that I have, and you can see the amount of light. And here's one of the things you can do with the olive oil lamp you can't do with anything else. And you'll see these very often up on a little wire stand that elevates it, because now the light will go down through the olive oil and light up things down below. In this case, it gives a little bit of an amber color, but I'm actually getting more light out into the area, because if you have it sitting down like this, that light's just going right into the table in this case, and it's not being used. When I elevate it up, that light will shine down through the bottom, and I'm getting that. So it does a lot of lighting. And here's these things just kind of lined up. The brightest one is number 1 on the right. The next brightest one being that ultralight liquid candle, number 2. In the middle, number 3, a regular candle. And then those little pre-charged liquid candles you can buy. The thing about those ones that you buy, they're not openable, they're sealed, you cannot get into them to refill them. The other thing is, I burned that thing, I noticed that the aluminum ring around the top gets really, really hot. I don't think it's hot enough to melt the plastic and burn anything down, but I was a little bit concerned about that, because it's hot enough to burn you. And that's off to the side where it crimps onto the top of the bottle. Light options. Well, you can think outside the candle, but be careful with these things. There are a lot of different things that'll burn, and when we do this class where we have more time, the full class, which is 2 hours long, we'll show you some other options. But Vaseline burns very nicely, but it is an open flame. Be careful. You have a safe option, these little safety lights, these Silume lights, the Chem lights, and those. What most people don't know is they have a shelf life. If you've had them in storage for 5 years, they probably don't work. They're meant to be rotated. They're like the little heat packs and things like that. As I mentioned in the fuels class, I mention again here, because the fuels and the lanterns and lamps all to go together, you must think safety. And I wrote the words so that it's a little sideways. You have to think about it. Extreme safety think. If you will learn and live by these rules, you'll be okay. But you ignore them, you can end up seriously injured. You can end up dead. Here are the concepts you need to understand. First off, previously, for generations, we had a lot of fire safety experience and training. You think about grandparents, great-grandparents, and their parents who were dealing with these lanterns and candles and all these things all the time. They were very conscious of the hazard, and they periodically burned their places down in spite of that. And children are a real hazard around flames. And so we had all of that experience that was being built into children from the time you could just talk to them a little bit and tell them, don't touch, do this. They were being trained all the time. That isn't happening. And so we are now very inexperienced with the way that our grandparents lived with fire safety in their everyday thinking and their everyday training. And the consequences are that, you know, we haven't had to be conscious of fire safety because we have all of these automatic safety things built into our electric lights and things like that. We're not using flame. We have very little open flame around houses, and so we just don't have this safety built into our society. You're going to have to be extremely cautious, very, very aware, and oversee things very, very carefully, because when people who are untrained start having open flames and lanterns and candles and fuels and things around, you just don't think. You make mistakes. And the problem is people get hurt when that occurs. Another way of getting light, get something hot. This is a little more, I'll say, normal and traditional for us. See that little filament that's in there at that yellow arrow? That tiny little tungsten alloy element in there just glows white hot, literally, and it gives us the flashlight. We just run them off of batteries, and you can have rechargeable batteries, rechargeable flashlights, large ones, small ones, different size batteries. And these are very, very handy, and they're very, very safe. Something I'd certainly recommend you have in your storage is going to be a battery tester, so you can tell the batteries are good or bad before you stick them in a light, and watch their condition, watch their health. Also learn how to store batteries. By the way, the newer batteries, like the alkaline batteries, our old batteries are carbon cells. You put them in the refrigerator, you put them in the freezer, they lasted longer. That's not true of alkaline batteries. Freezing them is not good for them. Keep them cool, just kind of like your food. High heat is not good for them, but just keep them cool, store them in a basement or places like that's better. Our original battery-less flashlight was one of these little hand pump things, a little dynamo in there, and as long as you kept squeezing the thing, you had light. Had no battery or any way to store it, but as long as it's a good workout for your hands. If you needed some hand strength, that'll give it to you. Hands get tired after 5 minutes of doing that, but they did in fact work, and you weren't dependent on batteries. You may find some things like this that I've had for a number of years. This was, I forget what they called it, but it was the Eternity Light or one of these kinds of things. Those batteries that you see lined up in there, those 4 batteries, those 4 D-size batteries, they are not active. These work very much like your little light sticks. You know, you take the light stick and you snap it and you break the little glass rod inside. It mixes the chemicals. That's how these worked, except their job was to give you electricity rather than to give you light. You twist the top on them to snap the container inside, shake them up, and then they will now run. So they could be in storage for many, many years. If I remember right, the manufacturer said about 20 years storage life on them. Excuse me. Actually, if you properly store some of your high-quality batteries, they'll store for 10, 12 years easily and even longer. Okay, stimulate atoms to give off photons. This is the high-tech electrical option that we have. We're talking about the LED. See, on the left is our little glowing white filament. We have our LED on the right over there. Well, let's look at this thing. Now, there's about what would be the actual size, real-life size right there. We get a little closer in it, you start to see some of the details. But take a look at it here. Here it is up close. That little plastic knob that's in there, the 2 orange arrows point to these are the electrical connections in the mounts. See that black arrow in there? And there's a tiny little white hair in there. It's as finer than a human hair. That's going to connect from that one on the left where the orange arrow is over to the top of where that little green arrow is, and there's a little black chip in there, tiny little black chip. And it is the thing that actually does the glowing. That's the little junction that's in there. LED, light emitting diode. This is a diode. And what happens is when you put some power to that thing, because of the way that it has doping, some of the chemistry that's in it, it now gives off light. Red being the first one that was done. So those are the internal components. The green thing, the green arrow points to that tiny little black chip that's in there, and that tiny little wire under the black arrow connects them together. When you put the right voltage to it, it gives off light. And the good news is it doesn't give off much heat, very, very little heat. You see, the incandescent bulb, you have less than 20% efficiency with it. In other words, you put the electricity to it, 80% of the power or more goes into making heat, and only 20% goes into light. In the case of the LED, they are 80% efficient or more, depending on the LED, so you get very little heat for the amount of light that you're producing, which means batteries last longer. Here's one of these little flashlights where that green arrow points into a little square chip. That little flashlight gives off a lot of light. It's very, very bright, much brighter than that other one. Well, you have a variety of LEDs now, and you have, like in this flashlight, that'll give you blue light, white light, or red light. You can select between them. And one of the things I'd caution you about when you're buying flashlights and things, this one at the top in here has these odd-sized batteries. Those are not C's, those are not D's, they're not A's, double A's, triple A's, or what have you. They're one of these odd-end kind of a cell thing. They're more expensive and they're not as common. Now, they last nicely, they have a good life to them, and they give you a compact flashlight, but the problem is you're not going to find them down at your local drugstore or C-store. They're not there, and they will cost you more money. So I recommend when you're buying flashlights and things like that, you're looking for standard size batteries. Double A's, C's, and D's would be my preference. Now you have a lot of options, and LEDs opened up a whole world to us of being able to do some other things. Like now we have on the left that little solar flashlight that's recharging. I've had that one now for 3 years, and I've been beating it up. It does a pretty good job. That yellow one in the center was my original Delta light. It was the first of the shake-up lights. It's well made. It's now approaching 20 years old, if I remember right, and it still works perfectly well. That one to the right of that one, in the second from the right over there, that's one I found at a trade show. I'd like to find again because it was very low cost, but it's high quality compared to most of them you'll find out there. And then you can have some of these wind-up ones. Now, quality is what I'm talking about. Here's they sold a whole bunch of these at $9.95. It was the eternal light, you know, just shake it up and it's environmental friendly and all these wonderful things. Boy, if you have one of those things, get out and use it for 30 minutes because it'll be in pieces if you do. It's not well made is the problem. As a matter of fact, when you take it, I say, I got one of these things because I want to know. I got it out of the box. I shook it up 3 times. I turned on the light and I was, my goodness, it's bright. This is wonderful. Okay, I take it apart. You see why it's bright? Look at the red arrow. 2 disc batteries in there the size of a quarter. So it's running off a battery. When the batteries are dead, when you remove them, you don't get much out of that thing. So it's a gotcha is what it is. It makes you think you really got a deal on the thing. The other thing is they're not well made, and you keep shaking them up. The springs break, and the little switch on it, which is just 2 little metal things you push together, everything falls apart and breaks apart, but the springs inside break quickly. That other one that I showed you was nicely made. This one right here, that is, I want to find that one again, that second one from the right, because it used magnets to cushion. It isn't slamming into the end. It's much quieter. I've had it now for 2.5, 3 years. I've been using it, and it's holding up nicely. And it costs a lot less than that one that's that yellow one right in there. So I'm hoping I can find it. It came out of Italy, is what the guys told me at the trade show. I like to go to trade shows to find things. You have these tiny little lights, like the one that's on my pocket knife on the right. The one that's in the center is a very small little light right there, yet very, very bright. And then there's another one that I carry on my keychain. So I like to have light with me if I really need to see something. Now, the headlamps, this is, as far as I'm concerned, is the way you want to go. If you're looking at a flashlight, put it on your head, because you point your head, you can see what you're doing. But when I'm looking for a headlamp, I don't want one that's running on those AAA batteries. They're small. It makes them fit on your head, but by golly, they don't last very long in comparison. This is one that I talked to the Brunton people about putting 2 of their products together. The yellow arrow, it has 4 AA batteries, but I can disconnect those. And in that white case with the green arrow down there, it has 4 C cells in it. And so it's got a lot of power. But there's something else very important about this that I'll talk about in just a moment. Conserving fuel. You might use some options to make your fuel go further. Like you see one of these little lights like this. It was the Marathon light. I could be burning a candle as a night light, but candles have their problems, a little bit of safety there. But eventually I'm going to be using that up. If I have rechargeable batteries in this little Marathon light, those 2 D cells in there, it will run for a minimum of 40 days. And I ran it for 40 days to find out. Now it's starting to get dim at the end of that. Now it's not a bright light. This is not a super bright white light. It's not intended to be. This is a night light. Remember what I said early on about well-being, particularly with children? They're in a situation that's unfamiliar. Things are not working right. They don't have TV. They can't do all kinds of things. Now they're freaking out in the dark. Give them a little light. They can look at some things, play with some things. They'll be happier. Another way of conserving fuel would be using some of these rechargeable flashlights that are solar rechargeable. Now, most of them are pretty darn cheap and not all that great. This one appears to be a good one. I've had good results with it. You may want to consider solar for powering other things, primarily to charge some batteries, to keep some of your appliance, little lights and things going, and CD players and things like that. It's nice to have something a little larger, so you might be able to run some lights like these fluorescent lights that are inside of this very large tent, because in the winter this thing is a cave. I mean, it is just dark in there all the time. And that's what the owners of this, I went out there and visited with them and taught a class in there because they had experience living in a tent for 2 years. I haven't done that one. They found that light was one of the most important things to them, so they have this little solar system that allowed them to run their fluorescent lights, and the light was the primary thing they were using it for in there. If you're in an underground shelter such as this, you'll really want to have some power so you can run these LEDs. Using sunlight. This is the original lighting that we use. Windows, just the windows in the house, so it minimizes the amount of lights that you have to run. Bring it inside the house. You can have clerestories up high, like in this house on the lower right-hand corner there, where you bring that light in up high. This is inside of a tent, a little shelter, a dome shelter, the Turtle Tuff tent in the lower left-hand corner. The inside of it has been insulated with this reflective bubble pack type of stuff, so that the light that comes through the door and the window on it reflects around inside. And during the day, it's nicely daylit in there. And if you have another kind of a light in there at night, that light's going to be reflected around on the inside. Of course, you can have other light spaces and sun spaces that if you have a dark house, at least you can go out of them. Of course, it can bring in some heat and have some other advantages there. And then, of course, you have skylights. Kind of a traditional skylight on the left there, but now then you can have what's called these light tubes, light pipes, sun pipes that will bring light into a room, and you can't see anything out of them. That one in the upper right-hand corner, and then what it looks like during the day down below, it looks like you have a light on. You don't have a light on, that's sunlight coming in. Very handy to bring it back into dark rooms. Moon, star, and sky glow. Maintain your night vision is what we're talking here. That's your ultimate backup. This headlamp I mentioned had something really important about it as a reason I wanted it built up the way that it was. It will only turn on in red. It'll only turn on in red. That's important to maintain your night vision. Now you can get some of these little lights that you can flip the switch one way, it turns on red. You flip it the other way, you turn on white. Well, you flip it to the white, you just blew your night vision. You get about 80% of your night vision in 20 to 30 minutes. Being in the dark, and then the rest of your night vision will come on in the next half hour to hour, depends on who you are, your health and everything, and you can see surprisingly well in the dark. You turn on a white light even for an instant, and now you have to start over again, and now you're blind for a while. You become dependent on light. If you have a monochromatic one, particularly something like red that's not at a real high level, it allows you to see around and find things and not fall down. You don't destroy your night vision, because night vision is actually better than you might think. When I take people on trips and we do some of our outings, some of them, light is not allowed. Flashlights are not allowed. And my rule is this: if you've been told this, if you bring a light, and I keep it. If I find it, if I see it, it's mine. And it's not giving it back to you. I don't care if it's a $100 one. It is mine. That's the agreement that we have. Because you need to learn to be okay without light in some cases. Now, I will always carry emergency light, because if somebody cuts themselves, you want to be able to see. One of the disadvantages of red only is you cannot see blood and raw flesh. If you have somebody who's been injured, you might want to have white light, or you might have a flashlight such as this one that you can switch it to blue or green, because now I can see an injury better, and or without destroying my night vision if I need to, or if I'm trying to read a topographical map that has different colors on it, I can see certain things in red, I can see certain things in the blue, but they're different things. And so if I'm trying to maintain my night vision, I may switch back and forth between blue, green, and red without hitting the white that'll wipe out my vision. Remember I showed you this one earlier? Number 1 on my red pocket knife tied to it, that is a red light. I know it's always there, so without disturbing my night vision, I can pull that one out. If I really needed to see something, I'll whip it out, see where that keyhole is or whatever it is I need to do, and I don't destroy my night vision. The ones that's on my keys at number 2 on the left, that is a white light. If I need white light, I've got it. And then that number 3 in the center, that one is a white light. Multiply what's available. This is some of the high-tech night vision things, really cool stuff. You can really see with this stuff. It's amazing. The new generation 4s or so, it's quite spectacular. They are very expensive, but you can get some older generations of things. And I've actually been told that there is night vision you can get at Toys R Us for kids. Now, it's not going to be a real high quality, and it may not hold up forever, but by golly, for something, you know, that may be well under $100, I've been told, it might do you some good for a little while. Okay. Loss of the utility infrastructure for light won't be a threat if, here's kind of my 8 most important points. It kind of covers everything we've talked about. First off, you have knowledge of your options. Please understand the definition of knowledge. Not information, I said knowledge. Knowledge equals information multiplied by experience. You have no knowledge until you get experience with things. Number 2, have knowledge of proper equipment O&M. That's operation and maintenance. You need to be able to operate them and maintain them properly, not abuse them, take care of them, fix them, repair them if need be. You need to be able to practice conserving fuels and power now. You should be doing that. We're such a power-hungry people, we just leave everything on all the time. You might want to consider changing some of that. And number 4 is one I talk about regularly. You are a part of a true community. We'll mention that a little bit more, but you need to have people around you who can help. You know how to scavenge fuels and take care of them and prepare them properly. You can produce a little electricity. You want some electricity. You want to be able to make a little bit of electricity. Photovoltaics, I believe, is the best way to do that. You protect your night vision out of habit. I do it out of habit. That's why I carry red lights and things like that. It's something I do because if I'm in an emergency situation, I want it to be automatic that I'm only going for red if I need to see something, so I don't blow my night vision, because then I'm going to be blinded for a while and I can get hurt. You have the habit of extreme safety think, even now. These things will not threaten you. Well, this is our class in our list of tools classes. There's a whole bunch of things to learn. If you look at all the learning opportunities in these different areas, there's quite a number of them. Tools has 39 classes in it, and we've done 2 of them so far in this series. There's 191 classes I've identified, and you say, oh my heck, do I have to know all this, do all this, and have all this? The answer is you can't. You absolutely cannot. It's totally impractical for you to have all of this information and all of this knowledge. And so you have a class, Foundation 1106, which is we're in this together. Survival is about outreach, cooperation, and community. You can't do it all. I can't do it all. We need each other. So you should be actively engaged in building community. Now then, will you live providently? It's your choice. You can determine whether you want to or not. If you make provisions in all of these areas that we've been talking about, then you can face the future without fear. Remember, the truth about life is that it happens. Be ready, because if you are, and I always look at the worst case scenario, so if I'm prepared for the worst, the rest of this stuff is easy. And that true preparedness is not about just a bunch of stuff. It's about what's inside of your head, what's inside of your heart. And then preparedness is a lifestyle. It's what we call provident living. And you have provident living as a lifestyle by playing with these things and experimenting all the time, which is what I do. I do weird things. Since I said our mission is to reach and teach people about some of these key aspects of provident living, there are free classes every week that you can attend and you can bring people to. If you go to the internet to safeharboralliance.com, there's the internet audio cast. You'll see it says radio right there. Every Tuesday night we're there. You can listen live. There's also an archive of these that's coming. Internet video cast every Wednesday night. Well, those of you that are signed on, that's where you are right now. And you also have us live at Cabela's in Lehi, Utah, if you can attend. If you can't attend, that's why we do it over the internet, so we can reach as many people as we can. There's also a free public video archive that's available. If you go under the webcasts again, go to the past webcasts, there's a list of them right there. There's 9 of these 9 modules where you can start watching those. There's more archives that are coming, and there'll be a lot of things available to our members. Also, And then there's a free newsletter that you can join, and we encourage you to join in with us so that you can be learning and that you can be sharing information with people. Well, everybody have a great evening, and I will see you later. Good night.